Welcome into TimeOUT Kansas City. We're taking a look at the week in sports in KC. It's been an eventful week. Just before we get started, I want everybody to know we're brought to you across the country and internationally, the U.S. and Canada, on your TV for free over the Fired Up Network, the best place to watch the Fired Up Network. The easiest place to see it, because we're a featured channel, is the True TV Plus app. You can get that free on Amazon App Store, on Roku, and on the Apple App Store for your computer, your Apple TV right behind me, or an iPhone. Tonight, I'm joined by the guys from the KC Sports Authority. They cover the Kansas City sports scene. Keegan Russell and Christopher Tenpenny. And guys, Keegan, tell me, where can our viewers find the KC Sports Authority content?
Yep, you guys can find us over on our own YouTube channel at KC Sports Authority or at KCSA Pod. You can also listen to our podcast on Spotify and then Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, as well at KCSA Pod. A lot of content we get into. We've been having a lot of fun doing it the last couple of years.
Awesome. And Christopher, thanks for joining us. And you guys got into it at the right time, right? You got the Kansas City Chiefs coming off of back-to-back Super Bowls. It looks like the Jayhawks are going to be ready to make another drive for a national title. They're consensus preseason #1. Way too early. And oh wait, hey, as we're filming this, it's a goal. Sporting Kansas City. They score. Excitement running wild. They put a point up on the minor league team from Tulsa in the U.S. Open Cup. But hey, let's we'll circle back to them. What's been the story of the spring for you guys on the KC Sports Authority?
Yeah, for us, off season for a chunk of our sports. The big stuff we talk about the most with our audience has been KU basketball. It's been by far our most popular topic. And this time of year is great for us, though, because off-season talk gets so many people interested. They want to know about the roster moves. They want to know about the guys coming in, what to expect, lineup projections, all that. So we've done a lot of KU basketball. But, of course, it's easy to do content when you've got the Chiefs coming off of a Super Bowl win back-to-back. And even though there's not as much happening right now and there's plenty of Chiefs content out there, it's still cool to be able to talk about back-to-back Super Bowl victories heading into year 3 to three-peat. And then Chris and I, we talk quite a bit of Royals. And, of course, it's easy to talk about the Royals when we're finally winning. When we were talking last fall, it was like, man, there's just nothing to talk about with this team. And now you've got one of the hottest teams in baseball and putting up a big night tonight against Detroit again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of great stuff. And then as we get into summertime, we'll transition to some more broader topics like NBA draft and NBA offseason, NFL offseason stuff. And then it's football season.
Well, hey, let's kick off our week through the Kansas City sports scene. Let's go with this. The Royals right now, they have the 5th best record in baseball. 50 games in, they've already won 30 games. They're well on their way to winning game 31. Last year, they didn't do that until well into June. What do you guys think their ceiling is at this point?
It's crazy.
Keegan, go ahead. Oh. All right, Chris, go ahead. That's fine.
Chris, you take it.
Yeah, so it's the playoffs. And in baseball, I think that's as high of a ceiling you can put. I know the Dodgers and Phillies have different expectations, but we saw what the Diamondbacks and the Rangers did last year, that you get in, you have a chance. And I think this Royals team can make the playoffs, which I, as big of a Royals follower as I am, have been keeping the excitement down. They haven't had the toughest of schedules, but the more you watch them, the more you're like, they are good at things that don't slump as much, defense, speed. They have good starting pitching. So they're not sitting up there slugging to where the whole lineup can go cold. They have all the other tools to where this is a playoff team. And when you have good starting pitching and defense and speed, you just got to get in. You never know what can happen. So.
Well, Keegan, that's a pretty familiar formula, because that's how they made it into the World Series 10 years ago and then won it 9 years ago.
Yeah, it's a winning blueprint. It's kind of disappointing it took 10 years to get back to that blueprint, but clearly this offseason, JJ Piccolo and John Sherman said, hey, let's put some pieces on this team to actually do something in the regular season early, and of course they're off to that hot start. One of the top 5 rotations, and not just AL, but all of Major League Baseball. They've got 2 potential Cy Young candidates. Bullpen's still coming together. We've got some nice pieces with General MacArthur as one of Chris's favorite guys. Of course, we love talking about him.
Sure.
And then you look at around the diamond, #1 defense in all of Major League Baseball. Same blueprint that we had 10 years ago, defense and pitching. But you've also got some offensive weapons. You got 2 guys that, I don't know what the message is like nationally speaking right now, but locally, you've got 2 guys that fans believe could be top 5 MVP voting. Salvador Perez at 34 is just raking right now, having one of his best offensive seasons. And of course, Bobby Witt, the superstar, doing just exactly what he's supposed to, getting closer to 300 on the season. Hasn't had the home run pop as much yet, other than his blast just a little bit ago. But you got 2 major cornerstone pieces, and the rest of the lineup just looks like they really flow together. This is a team, Chris and I were talking about this early on. They look like a team that's having fun playing together on the field. And if you partner that up with that defense and elite pitching right now, you're going to go a long way. I don't know if World Series is the ceiling or not, but hey, I'm perfectly content with whatever happens the rest of the way, because it's actually enjoyable to watch them right now.
Just not that I get into a lot of math and analytics, but just doing some simple math. If we take the remaining games, split them, and add 1, because it's not an even number, the Royals would end up with 87 wins if they just play 1 game over 500 from here on in. That would be 31 more than a year ago. It's one of the best improvements year to year in the history of baseball. And, I really was optimistic that they would get there, because Cole Reagan's just looked amazing since they acquired him. That may go down as being one of the best midseason trades ever.
Major steal. And I'm not to cut you off,
incredible.
But I was just mentioning Bobby Witt's power. He just went deep again. Second time
in
this game. So there's the power.
Usually as it warms up, the power starts to come home too. See more hitting as you get into the spring, deep into the spring, into the summer, especially at our stadium. It's not exactly a hitter-friendly park. But, you had Cole Reagan's doing well. Brady Singer seems to have found something now, because maybe he doesn't have all the weight of the world on his shoulders. And then you get 2 solid veterans with Waka and Lugo. It's amazing how much of a difference that makes, because last year, really most games, unless it was Singer pitching or Zach Greinke, and you hope he got out of there in the 5th, you really had almost no expectations of competing.
Yeah, they've been a giant breath of fresh air, Lugo and Waka. And I think, right, like you said, Reagan gets thrown in there too, even though he was a little bit more unknown.
Yeah.
He just came out of nowhere and has not looked back since he's been in this organization. But Brady, it's crazy. He's the 2nd longest tenured Royal on this team. It goes Salvador Perez and then Brady Singer. I think he felt that a lot. He coming off the WBC, didn't get a lot of time at camp. Only guy with a name in camp, on the team on the rotation last year. And it showed. He's really struggled this year. He's looking around. He's got 3 other guys that he's like, all right, if I don't have it or I have a bad start or whatever, it's not going to turn into a 4-game losing streak, 5-game losing streak in the next day. Flush it and restart. And I think that alone has just been so huge, because the reason they are 11 games over 500, I think they've only lost 3 games twice. I don't think they've gotten the 4-game losing streak yet. And that comes with the good starting pitcher. It's going to knock those 9-game losing streaks into, maybe a 2-7 stretch, or it's not going to be as detrimental as it was last year.
Yeah, and even a guy like Alec Marsh, like right now, he's still dealing. It's just great. You got 1 through 5 where you're not worried about, oh man, how early is the bullpen going to have to jump into this game? You've got 5 guys that you feel confident night in and night out, and even a guy like Alec Marsh that's not that experienced, because he doesn't have any of that pressure with the 4 guys ahead of him, he's able to just slide in there and do his thing, and it's been fun to watch.
Oh, absolutely. And we haven't seen the death spiral that had been the patented Royals move, that 10, 12-game losing streak, which, like you just said, Chris, is really hard to do. But man, they were doing it every single year. So I think we've rounded the corner. I mean, we're a decent stretch of the season in. I think they're going to get to a winning record. It's just a matter of, does the outfield come along? Do we get a little bit more offense? You take a look back at that 2014 team, we fondly remember Mike Moustakas, the Moose in Kansas City. But that first year, that 2014 year, he wasn't good. 212, 213 with, I think it was 17 home runs. You think MJ Melendez can circle the wagons and put up at least those numbers? I mean, the guy looks like he has everything you need. He led the minors in home runs. An extremely good athlete, a selective hitter, just hasn't been able to get it put together so far.
Yeah, and I think with MJ, the one thing that even though it's far enough in the season, he's still offensively not something you can count on. But I think he's taken leaps and bounds defensively.
Oh,
And if you've
absolutely.
got both those corner outfield spots that can just gun a runner down, it's not great that they're both hitting close to 200 or lower, but if you can count on them night in, night out defensively, I think there's enough in the lineup, especially with this new emergence of Michael Massey getting going. You know, you've got 1 through 6 that can really be consistent enough. And honestly, Freddie Fermin, when he's batting towards the end of the lineup, he's been solid. So I think you'll take some of the offensive struggle with potential Gold Glove outfield defense on both sides of the diamond. As long as they can continue to slowly get going. Because, they don't need to be hot right now, but if this is going to continue long term, both those corner outfield spots are going to have to up the production at least a little bit.
I also think it's because they've been bad for so long that we compare everything to 2014-15, rightfully so. I mean, that's the only time we've seen winning baseball. But those teams, like, yes, they had a more 1 through 7, 1 through 8. They weren't getting the production this current team's getting from like a Bobby Witt. Salvi was not doing what he's doing. Both of those guys are blowing Kane's numbers out of the water from 2015, who was the best hitter. So, yes, it would be wonderful if MJ and Velasquez and Renfroe could get it going. That would really lengthen the lineup. But when you have superstars and still Michael, Vinny, and Massey are doing their thing, yes, it may all be front-loaded, but you're still getting more production than they're still ranked very similar offensively to how they were on those championship teams.
Yeah, very true, because those championship teams, there wasn't a ton of power. I mean, it was very spread out. And you know what? If you have Kyle Isbell out there and he's a vacuum cleaner in center field, if he gets to 240, 230 and is fairly productive, that's fine. Because like you said, Keegan, you're dragging plus offensive numbers from second base and shortstop. So you can eat one of those corner positions being a little bit disappointing. But I think to make it to where everybody wants them to get to, at least one of them has to turn on.
Yeah.
Velasquez has to be what he was last year, or MJ has to get a little better.
If your biggest question marks offensively are your 8 and 9 hitters, then
you're
clearly
not bad.
Things are not that bad, because I think every team, even the Yankees, will complain that their 1 through 9 is not strong enough, and they've probably got the best offensive power 1 through 9 lineup we've ever seen. But if that's your biggest question mark, then I think you got to feel pretty good, because they're elite at the other stuff.
I'll give you that. Well, let's move over to the other side of the Truman Sports Complex. A little breaking news today. The potential assault charges, they're not totally dead yet, but the assault charges on Rashee Rice for supposedly sucker punching a photographer in a club look like they're not going to get pressed, because for some inexplicable reason, I mean, maybe maybe a little offer was made. The photographer has chosen not to press charges and has been asking the authorities to not press charges. So maybe that's down, and we're just down to the one major charge from the racing incident with the Lambo and the vet. Still facing all that. They're continuing it. It may get delayed through the season, which I think is probably their ideal. That's something that Frank Clark did with his lesser charges. They got to push all the way into the offseason so that suspension kind of fades away a little bit. How do you feel about the Chiefs? Do you think they made enough moves on offense to reload? Do you feel confident Rashee Rice is going to be out there? And even if he isn't, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, that enough to fix the wide receiver room? Either.
Yeah, sorry. I was like, I think they're fine, especially because it's not. I can't see it being more than 8 games, which is a lot.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's more than that. I agree.
Yeah, I think that's on the high end. I think they're probably able to get peeled down to 6-5. But either way, like I think this team has enough in the tank. They've had just as much or just as little power in the past. So missing Rice for half the season, they'll be able to weather it. I don't think it's going to be week 1, which is where a few of their tougher games are. I think he's going to be out there for Baltimore. I think he's going to be out there for Cincinnati. So if Rice is available for some of those early games and they have to weather it in the middle, we've seen time and time again this team is able to overcome that.
Yeah, I agree. The defense is still strong. I know there's still some questions with losing Snead and how the corners might look. And, does FAU show up this year as something that could be really beneficial? I'm counting him as an extra first-round pick this year, considering he didn't play much last year. But I think offensively, you shouldn't worry too much. It's Andy Reid, it's Patrick Mahomes. They're going to figure it out. We stumbled our way into the Super Bowl 2 years ago with beating up wide receiver core. We did it this last year. Clearly, Mahomes needs some weapons to make things happen, but doesn't need that much. And if you get a guy like Xavier Worthy to even put out similar production to what Rashee Rice did last year, I think honestly Hollywood Brown's going to be a really good fit in this core. I don't know nationally. I don't think there's a lot of confidence that he's going to put up like 1,000-yard season, but I think just the fit with this group is going to make a ton of sense. And Andy Reid's going to have I think more tools to play with in that receiver room. It might not be the strongest 1 through 7, 8 guys that they can throw out there, but I think they've got enough diversity of skill set that they're going to find a way to blend and mesh as a team over the offseason.
I think you got to feel a lot better too about what this wide receiver group does for Travis Kelce, because Hollywood Brown can fly. Xavier Worthy may be the fastest guy in the league, and he actually played wide receiver at the University of Texas. He didn't just line up and run a fly pattern every play. You get these guys going, the defense is going to have to respect 4.2 sub 4.3 speed and go back a little bit, which is going to make it easier for Travis Kelce to get going, because they didn't have to respect him last year when you were running Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney out there. Kadarius Toney, for all of his physical abilities, man, if it's not a bubble screen, he's worthless.
Unfortunately.
Is Kadarius Toney on the roster week 1?
1,000%, yeah.
Yeah.
The Rice stuff, there's no way. I think that unless someone busts out of camp or breaks out that they're not expecting, I think that they still talk highly about Toney. I think it was 2 weeks ago or whatnot, Veach was doing his rounds and was talking about how much they like Kadarius Toney. So,
I know.
It's like, this guy's going to be on the team. He's going to have a couple packages just because he is such a freak athletically that Andy isn't going to be able to quit him. So, yeah, he's going to be on this roster.
Yeah, he's just too much of a threat with that skill set, whether it's the return game with the new rules this year that could impact him there, or not having to be a guy that might not need to be relied upon as much this year. So maybe that eases some of the pressure on him and he can just find his sweet spot. But, yeah, 100% on this team. I would say it's more likely KT's on the team than Sky Moore, but I still think both of those guys are on this team come first game.
I think Sky Moore's there. And I guess, honestly, if you have Hollywood Brown, if you have Xavier Worthy, Justin Watson should be your number 3 if Rice isn't there. If Rice is there, he's your number 4. Kind of like we were talking about with the Royals. I mean, if your problem is your number 8 and your number 9 hitters, you don't have a huge problem. If your biggest problem is your 3rd running back and your 5th and 6th wide receivers, you're okay, because it looks like they got their tight end room a little bit better, because I like the addition of Wiley from TCU in place of Blake Bell. I think that'll be a big upgrade. You get a guy who dropped 1 ball in 4 years at TCU in place of Blake Bell, who would basically drop every other ball that was thrown to him. So I think that's a plus move. Any other Chiefs concerns? Anything that's been bubbling up on the KC Sports Authority?
I mean, we haven't talked about it yet on our pod, but obviously there's still the questions on the offensive line. Kingsley Suamataia however you say his last name. I know it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
He looks the part physically. Is definitely a guy that you could tell in this Andy Heck offensive line room is going to be a beast. But I don't know tomorrow, who's the 5-man guys you roll out there. Is he starting a left tackle? Is it Wande Morris? Does it Jawan Taylor slide over? Do they still go out and sign a veteran? I think the fan base probably hopes it's Kingsley wins that because you spent a higher draft pick on him. I'm not really that worried, honestly, about it because, again, we've seen Mahomes, the way he plays and rolls out to his right more frequently than his left anyway. His blindside tackle may not have the same value that other teams need out of it because of how mobile he is and the ability to break the pocket and make a play. But I think that's probably the other question mark is just what does that offensive line group look like? Do you go with the upside? Do you go with the capability? Do you just put somebody out there, roll with it? I mean, we've seen this team in the past that whoever's that 5th spot, left tackle position or left guard or whatever, as long as they get some run time, they start to gel. And I think that's really what's important is what are the 5 guys that are going to gel the most together that makes Patrick feel comfortable in the backfield and he can feel confident they can move the ball down the field.
Yeah, I'd agree there. I think Kingsley may well make sense. And honestly, even Wanye didn't look that bad when he initially got out there. He kind of got exposed a little bit after being out there a few games, but he wasn't any worse than Donovan, I don't think, Chris.
Yeah.
No, not at all. And like what Keegan was saying to echo, like I don't want to say lie, but the lie of the left tackle being the second most important offensive lineman is true if you have Peyton Manning, if you have Tom Brady back there. You want 5 good offensive linemen, but if you're going to only have 4 and then 3 elite interior linemen where they're not going to be pushing up the middle like the Chiefs do, I'm okay with left tackle being a little weak, a little bit of an experiment because of what Keegan was talking about, Mahomes' mobility. Now, we've seen what happens when you have 4 bad offensive linemen back
there. That doesn't work
for your life in the Super Bowl. But one being the left tackle, I'm not freaking out as much as I would maybe if he was more of a statue.
And are you guys okay with Clyde Edwards-Helaire becoming the new Jerick McKinnon?
Doesn't have that. He's not that X factor. McKinnon just seemed to know when to slip, when to pick it up. Like he had that X factor, which is hard to explain in football, but we all know it when we see it. Clyde does not have that, so that worries me a little bit. But again, we keep circling back to this. It's a backup running back. It's going to be okay. It's not the best. It's not the most alarming of things to be concerned about.
Yeah, I was really hoping we'd see a J.K. Dobbins or someone like that has shown capability of that Jerick McKinnon role. I think with Clyde, he just doesn't have the same burst, or maybe it's, again, like Chris is saying, the X factor, the football IQ that Jerick McKinnon has. I mean, McKinnon's an older running back. The fact that he's still playing and as successful as he is at his age for a running back is impressive. And Clyde's still a relatively young running back in the league. Had some disappointing injuries that's probably changed his trajectory. But I'm not worried too much that they're going to pick up somebody. There'll be probably 1 or 2 backs that come in at some point over this summer to do a visit and try out on the team and just kind of see what they look like. And there's probably going to be somebody that gets cut that might be of interest. I do think you want to find somebody to bring in because just, again, Clyde's injury concerns haven't been the most reliable and Pacheco's workload's starting to pick up. So you want to have some other guy back there that if Pacheco needs to be spelled for a game, you're not just relying on Clyde. But again, the Chiefs don't run the ball as much as other teams, so I don't think that's as much of a major concern.
Well, and actually, I feel okay with Clyde in this role because I think that's why he was drafted. He got drafted not because he was this dominant running back. He got some breakaway runs because, honestly, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase running wide with Joe Burrow at quarterback. Okay, are you going to concentrate on stopping Clyde Edwards-Helaire? No. So really, I mean, this is kind of his role, so he should feel pretty at home. I think this is going to be a good move for him. Hey, I hadn't had a chance to talk with you guys about the stadiums because it's still an issue. It's still going around. The teams have talked about splitting up now. We've heard the state of Kansas is looking at using star bonds, which, not to get too into the weeds, that's the tax increment financing method that was used to develop Children's Mercy Park, where Sporting Kansas City plays. the Port Authority, who helped fund the KC Current Stadium, CPKC Stadium, they're coming into play now as a possibility. Where do you guys weigh in? What do you want to see happen with the Royals first?
I would love to see the Royals build a downtown stadium like that. I think that's where baseball is supposed to be. I think that's where it's the most fun. We see it all across Major League Baseball that, the Monday through Thursday game attendances are down just naturally. There's so many. So leaving a little bit of a perk up to that by having a downtown stadium, I'm a fan of. And like, again, there's just they're out of the way right now. It's just, I love the Truman Sports Complex. It's going to be my favorite place as a memory as a kid. But it's time to move on a little bit. I would like them to see downtown in Missouri. So I hope that's kind of where they are able to, this wedding right now, maybe get back and have a better plan, better location, kind of regroup and come out and get that done.
Yeah.
Like Keegan, it wouldn't hurt to hit it while the iron is hot if they come off of a winning year and maybe make it into the playoffs. That would be the time to go ahead and push for it.
Yeah,
but
we all know winning cures all. If you win, anything will get passed. I think we saw that. I think the only thing that was surprising was the fact that they partnered together on this vote with the success of the Chiefs, and it still failed, was a little, something to think about. But downtown Kansas City baseball is going to happen. When a sports team wants to do something, it's going to happen regardless of if the fan base is on board. It's just going to happen. There's still a lot of weeds to work through as far as the details of what would happen. I was not a big proponent of what KC Tenants put out there about how many people were going to be negatively impacted in the grand scheme of things. Someone's always going to be impacted by a move like this, but the greater commerce that would be generated from a downtown stadium would be tremendous. I think it would also help fan attendance. Like Chris said, it is really cool going out to Kauffman and going out to Arrowhead and having that experience. But not everybody wants to spend their entire day in the parking lot and hanging out and then going to the stadium. Outside of that, there's nothing to do over there. So if you're the casual fan that might need something to do, if you're in downtown KC near all the entertainment district and out there, there's so many things you can go do that even if you're not catching the game, you're probably tuned into what's happening around you. And I think that's just better for the city. But if it were me and I was the Chiefs, I would start looking at Kansas. I would say peace out, Jackson County. You guys clearly don't want to do enough to keep either franchise happy where we are. We'll go have some state-of-the-art facility in Johnson County, and now we'll be the Kansas City Chiefs still, but Kansas will pick up the bill. I don't think any of us over here have a problem taking that bill because it's really not that much in the grand scheme of things as well.
No.
But Johnson County out there, that area, I mean, I know there's multiple areas in Kansas they're looking at, but it's kind of built and designed for this kind of move. And I think there's enough developers out there that'll fork over a ton of cash to try and get that done. So if it were me, I would pick up that phone and say, all right, what's the best offer? And let's consider moving over there.
Well, I think they'll be getting that Star Bond offer from the state of Kansas, from Kansas City, Kansas, Wyandotte County, the Legends Complex, right next to the Hollywood Casino. So you can have your sports book because Kansas has managed to figure out that, hey, legal sports gambling is a good idea. It makes a lot of money. And if you have the NFL stadium attached to it, I mean, my God, I don't know how much money they make off of the sports books in the EPL, but they have the sports books in the stadium in the English Premier League. They're right there. You do your in-game bets and you just go and place them. And it would be a night and day difference. And the space is all there. The parking lot's there. If you want your tailgating, you can do it. And yeah, I just think that's almost a no-brainer because you got to feel part of the reason why it failed. I mean, obviously the Royals kind of ham-handed, changed their plan 3 or 4 times, landed on the one that was the least popular and had the most public. None of that made sense except for the theory that the city wanted it to go there. And there was going to be some city money coming and they just didn't talk about it.
It felt weird. It felt like one of those things where they just assumed the plan was going to go well and they really didn't dive into the business details. And even if they did, they just didn't really effectively communicate early enough to the fan base of what we want other than we're going downtown.
Well, and maybe they truly just said, hey, we're going to glom off the Chiefs. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl. We can do anything. Let's go.
I think the Chiefs are the one that played it perfectly. They do not want to stay at Arrowhead. My theory, like they had a lot of blind faith, and that was what they wanted to do. They had Jeffrey Flanagan, a longtime Royals,
Sure.
saying that there was no way they were leaving Arrowhead, and like they didn't. They're coming off 3 Super Bowls back to back. Then and we're not the face of it. The plan they came out with were all a bunch of modifications they've seen in Las Vegas and LA, but not good. Like they didn't have a real plan. They just had a nice piece of paper with. And I heard like Clark Hunt didn't even go to the yes meeting. Mark Donovan was there in a pullover. The Chiefs did not want to win this. If they wanted to win it, they would have been the front face of it. They would have been out in front. They would have done more marketing. You would have seen Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce everywhere. But what do we see? We saw John Sherman. They let the losing Royals be the face because they want to split off and have the 2 states bid against each other so they can get the nice shiny dome like 2 of their rivals have. That's it's a little bit of a working theory, but that's kind of how I saw it play out.
Well, allegedly, after visiting Allegiant Stadium, where the Raiders play in Las Vegas, Chiefs ownership was quoted as saying, I want this.
Yes.
And what they laid out was not that. I mean, it was
just
a minor redo to, I mean, I looked at it when they released the video and went, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
How is that $800 million? Where do you even put the money? I mean, and here, just talking as someone who's been able to be in the locker rooms at the different facilities, the locker room at Arrowhead is nothing to write home about. It's actually not as nice as Sporting Kansas City's locker room.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about Sporting KC's
not much bigger.
Way above.
Yeah, it's not much bigger. And obviously there's a lot more people on an American football team than there is on a football team, a soccer team. I mean, that stadium, I don't think you can upgrade it. I really don't. I mean, unless you do like a Soldier Field where you gut it, take it down to the studs and build it back up. But even if you do that, look at what they want in Chicago now. They want a new stadium because, hey, that massive down to the post rebuild of Soldier Field, yeah, well, that's not enough. It's dated. We need a new stadium.
Yeah, I think the not the question, but maybe the struggle from a fan's perspective, and it's probably more so on the Royals than the Chiefs, I'm guessing, just because baseball is the more nostalgic sport, I think, between the two. And you still have a couple of these old iconic stadiums that are still out there. And as much as I would, I mean, the Kauffman, I think, as a place to just watch a game is great. But yeah, once you start getting into take the game away and take the fan experience away and start getting into the nitty gritty of what is baseball today, what do you need in a good stadium to be competitive, not just for your baseball team, but for other outside events you want to do. And then flip side of football, the big major events they're doing, you've got to have upgraded, up-to-date technology and facilities. And as much of the nostalgia of what the Chiefs and Royal stadiums have been for the last 50 years, it's probably time for something new. But I think that's what's hard for fans to break up with is they're both right next to each other. Everybody has a memory of going out to the K or going out to tailgate Arrowhead and the crossover, and that's great. But sports are changing, and you see the franchises that have the best value moving forward and are doing the most things are upgrading all around them, and they're not just doing it for their own stadium's sake. It's impacting the city economy around them tremendously. I mean, look at what Atlanta's done just in the last couple of years with their new stadium, and it just drives a lot more commerce to the area. And I think it's something that's best for everybody because we know Jackson County is not going to do anything to develop around there, even if they were probably granted the funding for it, because there's nothing out there to do.
No, I mean, the Adams Mark Hotel, it's closed down. It was bought out by a community development group. They're wanting to make it into a youth sports complex. I mean, that's not, it's good. It's good for the area, but man, it's not going to drive much of anything.
I went to Taco Bell after game 1 of the 2015 series. That's after that 14-inning game. That's what me and my buddy did because that was all that was out there.
That's it. That's your choice.
Yeah.
Well, and the people of the World Cup, the people who visit Kansas City, They're going to be able to enjoy a nice Casey's pizza now.
Oh, right.
So you can get that. That's right
Nice
there.
hat.
Maybe the Burger King may be reopened by then.
Reopen.
Could be.
Goodness.
Oh
my God.
Yeah, it's coming. But hey, even closer to home, you don't even have to look to Atlanta. I have season tickets for the Kansas City Current. Have a pair of season tickets. Been able to use them the last couple of weeks. All the negative stories about the parking. Oh my God, how are you going to park? Oh, it's a nightmare. You're not going to be able to park. Tried parking both options. One, parked downtown, took the streetcar to the shuttle bus and just walked a little bit down the riverfront. Great, no problem. In and out from my car to the stadium in my seats in under 20 minutes. So less time than it takes to get into
Walk across the parking
space
lot.
at Arrowhead. Yeah. And then the second game, I went and parked at Bally's Kansas City Casino. Valet park, walk across the river. You're into the stadium in under 10 minutes. And you can go and have a nice dinner at America's #1 sports bar. Not a paid endorsement, Chicky and Pete's, right there at the Bally's. And, it's a great experience. And if you go the other way, all the local restaurants in the river market, I mean, that area has just boomed. And as this current stadium and their development comes into play, think of how much that area is going to benefit. So you can see it. I mean, if you're against a downtown stadium, go to a Kansas City Current game. You can get tickets on SeatGeek. Go to the game and actually look at how it's going to benefit the city. It's night and day. It's amazing that this city, a major U.S. city with a huge waterfront, hadn't really done anything to develop it until just the last couple of years. But now it's coming, and you're a couple of years away from that having $800 million of development. It's going to be a huge change for the city.
And bring so many more sporting events, not just potential World Cup stuff in the next couple of years, but Super Bowls, Final Fours, all that is much more potential with the expansion of your sports facilities and all the additional concerts and events you can put on throughout the years. Yeah. To me, it just seems like a no-brainer to move in that direction, especially for the Royals. Majority of teams now are starting to look at that type of entertainment district around the stadium, and that's just harder to do if you're in an isolated area with nothing around you.
Yeah, 100%. Now, have you guys been following the Kansas City Current? Have they gotten you into women's sports? They're top of the table, undefeated in the National Women's Soccer League.
They have not for me, because I personally have a hard time watching anything that's not the World Cup and Team USA. Like, soccer's just not mine. But I would be more happy to go out there. I just haven't made it out to experience it because I've heard it's incredible.
Yeah, the atmosphere is great.
Right.
And Keegan?
I am not a soccer guy. If someone wants to take me to a game with them or give me tickets, I will for sure do it. I have a hard time with the let's run around for 3 hours and hopefully a goal is scored. Not saying that all soccer is no goals, but to me, it's I'm sure it's much more entertaining being there physically than watching on TV. I think most sports are like that, but soccer it has not captured my attention enough to really dive into it. I will say from a marketing perspective, I love the branding of the team, the colors and the uniforms. And I think that's huge. I think I've also Sporting KC's branding has been pretty solid too. So I think it's on the rise for sure. Winning definitely helps. I mean, I'm not that I'm not paying attention, but when I see that they're one of the best clubs right now, that's great. Because like we said earlier, winning cures all. And if you can put out a winning product on the field, people are going to pay attention to it.
Absolutely. Would it help any if I let you know that a 21-14 NFL game is really a 3-2 game?
Right. No, for sure.
That's a good argument. It's a good argument.
It has nothing. I don't know. I don't know what it is about soccer, but there's some Kansas Cityans that will call us the soccer capital of the world. You're just not speaking to two people that embrace that.
Unfortunately.
Fair enough. Well, let's talk about another sport then that Kansas City can say they're one of the leaders in the world. College basketball. Mentioned it earlier. KU, the Jayhawks, Bill Self saw what happens when you only have 8 players and said, hey, I'm getting this fixed. I'm getting guys that can shoot. We're going to have an outside threat. And they hit the transfer portal hard, and it looks like they did fix that. Johnny Furpey's gone. I mean, looks like he's going to be almost inexplicably, he's going to be a first-round pick. But how do you feel the Jayhawks have done on reloading? Do you think they've hit the right formula this year? And with the returning Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams, Devontae, do they have enough to get over the top and get back to where they belong?
On paper, they have the most talented team I think Bill Self's ever had. On paper. That's still saying, I mean, he's had some really, really good teams, but theoretically, all these pieces should be fitting together real nicely. The two major things we needed last year was depth and scoring capability. Like, I can go create myself a shot. Zeke Mayo, even though he wasn't D1 high-end level type guy, he looked really good against top competition. He's a guy that can create his own shot. He's going to get fan attention just because of being the local kid. But he can create a shot at any given moment, step back three. He's got a nice step back three. AJ Storr, probably one of the best scorers in the nation, guy who can get his shot from anywhere. Bill Self said it the other day on Andy Katz's podcast that Storr's the guy that when the shot clock's winding down, I don't have to worry about who's going to take the shot. He's going to go get a bucket because we really didn't have that go-to guy who could create and facilitate a shot. Then you get a guy and that team had a couple guys that could do that. And you see what happens when you have multiple guys that can get their shot. You're playing a national championship. So I think the pieces are great. Rylan Griffin is almost a perfect 3-and-D wing guy for a Bill Self team. I think there's still going to be questions. The fan base still has questions on rotation and minutes. We still saw how ineffective it was playing KJ and Hunter. I'm not as concerned about that because you have better pieces around them now. So I think Bill Self will figure it out. But yes, in theory and on paper, this should be a national championship or bust kind of team.
I'm just an old man when it comes to KU basketball because I hate the transfer portal. I really do. Like everything Keegan said is right. Like I have nothing to argue, but I'm like, okay, the 08 team was coming off a year that they lost Julian Wright and like Brandon Rush was coming off 2 bad knees. Like, but they all were, juniors and seniors and they went on a run. The 12 team, they just lost the Morris twins, but Jeff Withey was in his second year and Robinson came out of nowhere. Tyshawn Taylor. Oh, they ran to like, and then you do that with the 22 team too, in a more current era, like just a bunch of older, Braun and Novaci. Like, I don't necessarily love just the roster overhaul every year. I think it's so hard to do what Bill Self really wants to do. That chemistry and just knowing each other's what they thrive on. And so that's what scares me year on, year out. It's the reality we live in. I can sit here and complain about all I want. It's not going to change, but that just gives me pause so much on when I see what has worked for Kansas and where college basketball currently is.
Yeah, the transfer portal, it is hard to get used to that because essentially you have unrestricted free agency every year for everybody. And to be fair, the schools had the option to cancel any scholarship anytime forever. So it is fair that it's going both ways, but it's definitely a different ballgame. I mean, these teams really almost need to have a general manager because Bill Self took a lot of heat in the NCAA tournament this year for basically saying what everybody knew that, hey, I've been looking at next year for a while.
Right.
Well, you'd be an idiot if you weren't because you have to sign the players like the next day.
Right.
There were transfer portal players being signed during the tournament. So, yeah, he had to be getting ready because if he wasn't, you were dooming yourself to the next year because we can just look down the highway a couple hours and see how it goes going in a major conference with a freshman-heavy team. Missouri managed to go 0 for the SEC despite having a really highly regarded recruiting class. So it's going to be part of the game. You're going to have to do it or you're just going to fail.
Yeah, the portal is so messy. You can't do anything about it right now. I think give it about 3 more years and there'll be a lot more, not necessarily regulations, but they'll kind of figure out what do we really want the portal to look like. I am not a fan of you can transfer at any time and play immediately. I don't like that, but I also don't like all right, you have to sit out a year just because you transferred. I think it does need to be some situational. But when I look at a guy's ESPN page and it's 4 schools in 4 years,
Yeah.
I don't like that. This shouldn't be free agency. You shouldn't just be able to pick up and go wherever. I don't know really what the answer is to it, other than they got to have some sort of contract system set up in a CBA. And I don't think we really want to get there. It's gonna get there though.
Yeah,
College
absolutely.
athletics is gonna get there. It's gonna look like a professional league, but it's messy, but it is the way the game is played now. And I think the coaches that are going to figure out how to construct a team better today are going to be the ones that perform. You're still going to have your teams like UConn that can bring in talent from the transfer portal and supplement it with their own development guys. But the big programs across the country are going to be playing the free agency game for the next couple of years.
Yeah,
I think they have to. They
maybe ran like they're not going to look anything like it because there's just so much transferring and going around. So there's going to be more parity, but the product on the court and on the field is going to take a hit.
I think you definitely saw this year that the transfer portal allowed other teams to be more competitive, which was great. I mean, the NCAA tournament is so much fun every year, and you've got teams that can now get guys that they might not go there because they can get a check. I think that the question I have is, though, what do the transfer portal windows look like? Because the portal windows are not based on athletics; they're based on the school year.
Yes,
but you've heard coaches complain that, hey, we just lost our round 2 game of the tournament, and tomorrow I've got 7 kids declaring for the portal, and the season's not even over. Then you've got the coaches that, hey, I'm trying to coach for a Final Four this weekend, but I have to spend half my time recruiting because these 5 guys just popped up and we can't not talk to them. So I think there's going to have to be a little bit more oversight to figure out what's effective. Because it seems like right now there's a lot of leverage on the player side to kind of go where they want. And some guys are waiting until the last minute to make things happen and use that leverage to force another team to cough up more money. But it's a little fishy. It's a little wild. And I'm not a big fan of it. But it is nice, I think, for the guys that, all right, I stepped into a situation I wasn't prepared for. I need an exit and go somewhere else. So in that case, I do think it's beneficial to maybe not the top tier talent guys, but the guys that are 2nd, 3rd, 4th tier that just need to get to a better program or their coach leaves or something. It definitely gives them some more flexibility to where they're not focused on going to somewhere that they might not have a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, totally agree. And I do think men's college basketball needs to be careful, though, because the women's tournament was more entertaining this year. They broke records for ratings. They shattered records during a period where nothing grows in television ratings. Mm-hmm. They were up by huge percentages. And the men's tournament, some of those games were just unwatchable. So they got to be careful. I mean, you gotta have a little bit of guidelines. You can't just let everything just roll and hope it makes it to the end of the race. It's kind of a dangerous game. Well, hey, let's go to our weekly champion. I got the Wrestling Spotlight Championship belt here. Guys, give me your champion for the week of Kansas City sports.
Man, that's tough. I think I'm gonna give it. I'm gonna give it to Michael Massey, who coming into today. I don't know. I have his numbers updated for today, but he was 8 for 14 on the homestand with 2 doubles, 2 bombs, and 0 strikeouts. Now I know he's got 2 Ks today, but when you're looking for more offense and you got your 5-hole hitter doing that behind Salvi, I think that's gonna be my champion for this week on a 4-game win streak.
That's a good one.
It's definitely got to be a Royal. I mean, they're hot, 7-3 in their last 10, crushing the Tigers right now, going to the top of the 9th. I'm going to go Salvi just because, again, it is super impressive. A 34-year-old catcher who still plays catcher quite frequently, doesn't take many days off. To have one of his best offensive outings, leading the major league in batting average in the American League. Not in the top 5 for MVP voting yet, but he's knocking on the door. I got to give it to him because he's been the most consistent guy in the team right now, and this guy. It just seems that his production keeps going up and up. So I'll go Salvi.
Good one too. Hey, I'm going to go with a guy who hasn't really probably gotten the credit he deserves, and probably took way too much blame last year. Matt Quatrero. He was getting absolutely roasted all last year. Everyone's saying, oh man, this guy doesn't have the enthusiasm. He's not getting angry. I don't know how we can bring him back. Well, as we're making comparisons back to 2014, you heard a lot of those same things about Ned Yost. And I don't know if Matt Quatraro is going to take them to a World Series and win a World Series the next year, but got to give the guys some credit because it is the same guy who was managing them last year as they were steamrolling their way for 100 losses. Same guy who's taking them where they're right now with just a couple more wins. They're pacing 90 wins.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll give Matt Quatraro the win this week.
Because I think JJ Piccolo said today, too, some things have come to light to where Q wanted to do more managerial things, mix up the lineup, pinch hit more like we've kind of seen him do this year. And they were embracing the evaluation season. And JJ Piccolo said today that he, asked Matt to do that less and to let this guy hit to see if he can do that. So he was kind of managing with one arm tied behind his back last year. And we're getting to really see what he's capable of with the full reign this year. So I love that pick.
Yeah. Well, and with that, we'll wrap it up. Keegan, Christopher, just let everybody know again how they can find your show and what days it airs. And
Yep. You can check us out over on YouTube. Search KC Sports Authority or KCSA Pod. Like and subscribe to the show there. We don't have set days we put out content, but we try to have 1 or 2 episodes up every week. And if not an episode, some form of short content's going out there. And then you can also listen to us on Spotify or check us out on any of our social medias at KCSA Pod.
Excellent. And again, you can see our show on the Fired Up Network, coast to coast in the U.S. and Canada. And the best place to find the show, where we're a featured channel on the True TV Plus app. You can get that on Amazon, on Roku, or on the Apple App Store. TV, computer, phone, it's all there. It's all free. Fired Up Network on True TV Plus. Hey, for the host of the KC Sports Authority, Keegan Russell, Christopher Tenpenny, I'm Gerald Bentley. Thanks for joining us here on TimeOut Kansas City. Stay tuned to the Fired Up Network for more breaking sports news. We'll see you next week. Bye.